Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We have with us today Brian Radford. He is a Democratic candidate for state representative in Legislative District 17. Let's see, we invited the other people who are running in the district. We have the other Democratic candidate, Dana Almond, is going to be with us on August 31st. Rachel Jones, a Republican candidate, declined to participate. And we have not heard back from Republican candidate Corey McGarr yet. So anyway, we're going to get started here. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask Mr. Radford to tell a little bit about himself. I'll have some questions for him, and then we're going to keep everybody muted for this chat. But please write down your questions in the chat, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So, Mr. Radford, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, to start with, I'm Brian Radford. I'm running for the Arizona House in District 17. And we're fortunate this year we have 2 open seats. There's no incumbents for these seats. So there's 2 candidates, me and Dana Almond, and we're the Democrats running for the seats. A little bit about me. I was originally born in California. I was raised and grew up in Ohio. That's where my parents are originally from. I've public schooled my entire life. I graduated in '93 from Kent State University in Ohio with, of all things, a degree in Spanish translation. So I worked up there many years with different companies that have interest in Mexico, Central and Latin America. So I worked in like export departments right around the time that the original NAFTA agreement was made. So I know about international trade and exporting products across the border. I was up there doing that for, several years after college. And then about 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to relocate down here to Arizona. And a friend of mine worked at a place called the Arizona Department of Corrections. So not knowing anything about corrections, it's working for state government. It's the state agency like all the others. So I worked with mental health and max custody inmates most of my time there. I worked up the ranks through sergeant, through counselor, to supervisor, working my way up to associate deputy warden. And I would sit in staffing meetings at those long tables and ask rational questions. Why do we do this way? Why can't we do this an easier way? Due to lack of resources. And a lot of the answers were, well, that's the way we've always done it. So that's the way we do it. And it's kind of, not surprising, but I did that for many years. And when I left corrections, I went to the public school system and had the opportunity to work in special education with students with autism and learning disabilities. So that was a challenge. It was just switching gears from adults to children and still working with behavioral orders and special needs. And that was fulfilling for me as working directly in education. And I'm also a foster parent. So I have 4 foster children that are now adopted. So they're permanently with us. And over my years of doing those as an officer, educator, and a foster parent, it's allowed me to see how local and state government, the deficiencies or the lack of resources that we put into some of these areas and the effects. I saw the effects when I worked in the school system. It's challenging to go through your day-to-day activities when you don't have enough tools to do the job the right way. And it was the same in the prisons, the lack of funding, the lack of understanding of what the core mission was with the rehabilitation and getting people prepared to go back out into society and the issues that are involved in that. And then with the foster care system, we have a system that's overburdened. It has a lack of social workers. There's a lack of people that are dedicated to help find permanent homes for those kids. And they stay in state custody or state care. Many of them, when they leave or they age out of the system at the age of 18, they don't have anywhere to go. And it just feeds that pipeline of homelessness or delinquency, or they might end up in the prison system. So there's some real concerns that I have, and that's why I'm running, is to make some changes and positive changes. My biggest issues is, like everyone else, the voting rights and access to the ballot, early balloting. is very important. It's been in place in Arizona for over 30 years, and it's never been an issue. And when you hear people that are election deniers or people that are challenging our systems just because they didn't get the outcome that they wanted, it's wrong. We know that. Other than that, it's the women's rights, human rights, LGBT rights. This is the first time in history.
I'm sorry, you muted for a second.
Sorry.
The last you saying was this is the first time in history.
Okay. This is the first time in history, for at least me, in the past 50 years, of seeing where the court actually took away rights instead of granting rights. Usually the Supreme Court is there, court systems are there to secure people's rights and make sure that there's equitable treatment under the law. This is the first time we're actually seeing rights taken away. So that's concerning for me. And then of course, our water and climate. We do live in Arizona, desert environment. However, we need to be concerned about our water resources and resiliency of the water and the usage. We don't have any real way of monitoring groundwater in the rural areas. In the urban areas, there's water management areas that are managed better than in the outlying areas. It's not managed as well. And we've all read the reports of farming uses a lot of our water. And there's even foreign outfits. There's the Saudi firm that grows alfalfa for export because they've depleted their water resources. So for them to come here and use our water resources, and it's not even being metered, it's not being measured of how much is being used, that's a concern. We need to change and have our groundwater as well as our surface water should be better maintained, better managed. And I think that's lacking. So all of that together, there's some serious concerns facing us, and I want to help solve some of those problems.
Okay, and we're gonna you mentioned a lot of things I want to ask you about.
Okay.
Before we do that, I just want to check how long have you lived in your district?
I have been in my district about 17 years.
17 years. Okay, great. All right, so you know, as you mentioned, you know, abortion is a really big deal right now. The state legislature, after Roe was overturned, is going to have a lot of power to pass laws relating to abortion. What kind of laws, you know, should be passed in Arizona?
I would like to see not just for women's reproductive care, but just medical privacy. Abortion is healthcare. It's a healthcare decision between a woman and her doctor, period. The government really should not have a say-so, because that can be construed or open the door to all kinds of things. So I think if we approach it as medical privacy issues and just the ability of people to have bodily autonomy over their own decisions, their own body, government does not have a place in that. It's strictly between a woman and her doctor, and medical privacy should be protected. And as a legislature, I would promote or support any bill that would protect that right.
And so in the conversation, that national conversation we've had, there's been a lot of focus on kind of the outlier situations, like the ectopic pregnancies or the really late term abortion. There's, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but like a lot of people have abortions who are women who are already mothers, but they just decide that they don't want to be, they don't want to have a child right now. You know, if I give an example of if a 25-year-old woman got pregnant and just did not want to be pregnant at that time, would you want laws that would allow her to be able to terminate the pregnancy?
Yes, yeah, because it's her choice. Mm-hmm. Again, it's between the woman and her doctor. It's a decision that not everybody wants to make that decision. It's not to say that you're in favor of it, but it's just a decision that your own personal freedom over what to do with your body should be protected.
Okay. And we have going to school funding. You know, we had a big expansion of the voucher program in Arizona. What do you think should be done about that?
I think there should be limits to that, because basically you're taking public dollars out of public schools. So to say that the public schools are failing, well, part of it is if you're removing the funding mechanism from them, that's probably one of the reasons. We don't spend our per pupil rate here in Arizona is lower than the national average. We don't invest enough in teacher pay. We're far behind in teacher pay and per pupil spending. So it's an investment. It's an investment in the future. And to have charter, or what they want to call public charter schools or magnet schools, there's a way of doing it without removing funding from the public schools. You can't steal apples from one basket and put it in the other one and then complain why the other basket is so empty. And that's what we're doing. You're basically moving it from one bucket into another bucket. And by doing so, you're removing money that's much needed in the public schools that are already underfunded. So by doing this, you're just going to create more underfunding. And it's harder to get that put back in place. So as a legislator, I would support bills to limit voucher expansion, limit the ability to do this, and be able to, at the same time, invest more in public education, special education programs, STEM programs, things that children need to compete in the 21st century.
Okay. So you mentioned that you have a degree in Spanish translation, and you have some experience on the business side with Latin American companies and whatnot. So in Arizona, right, we're a border state,
Right.
and we have the Republican legislature appropriated a lot of money for border security issues. It seems to me that they're kind of trying to follow in the footsteps of what Texas is doing, being a much more active role as a state, rather than leave it to the federal government. What do you think the role of the state government should be with regards to the border, immigration, border security, drug smuggling, whatever you want to address?
Well, it's an international border, so it's a federal issue. Mm-hmm. But the state can work in conjunction with the federal authority. We have our county sheriffs that are impacted because of any of the criminality that's caused coming across. But as far as trade, we should be using our border to benefit both Arizona and Mexico. It's a gateway to the rest of the world. So for business and trade, we should be supporting trade efforts to be able to maximize the use of our border without having all this fear mongering about an invasion of a caravan. There's no caravan. And to have a state allocate, I think in the last session, they allocated like 500 million or 400 million. It was an obscene amount of money to bring out of the state budget for border wall. And when in fact, he's using shipping cargo containers along the Yuma border, when our own president just negotiated with the president of Mexico, Obrador, to spend $1 billion. Mexico is going to invest in technology. And that's what we've been relying on, is Customs and Border Protection has technology that they can use. So we need to work smarter, not harder. We don't need a physical barrier per se. Those areas or trade routes that we know where smugglers or anything is happening can be patrolled by Border Patrol. What we need is more Border Patrol staff and more effort on the federal side to help beef up where we know there's areas that lack security. Let's get Border Patrol on it to say, hey, we noticed that in Yuma sector, we have this, issue. Let's, do more on the security issue, not so much on physical barriers.
And then moving into prisons, you have a lot of experience with that issue. And we've also been seeing some kind of troubling reporting about how prisoners are cared for in Arizona. We also have the privatization. I know that happens a lot with ICE, with the federal, but also at the state level. I was wondering, could you tell us, what do you think should be done to make the prison system better? And what do you think about privatizing prison services or institutions?
The privatization effort is kind of a misnomer. They kind of use it to show that they're making efficiencies, when actually private beds cost more than state-ran beds. And I know recently, when they decommissioned or closed the Florence facility, they signed a large contract with an outside provider, with a private company. And it's going to cost Arizona taxpayers more money to house those inmates. It was like 2,700 inmates. They could have been reclassified and rehoused within the existing state system without going to that private contract. So we're spending money, exorbitant amounts of money, on contracts that can probably be better served by just having more state ran facilities and make it easier, because you're not, the state side, you spend less than you do in the private sector. And then the private sector's for profit, they're going to look at ways to cut corners and to cut issues, and it's not safe and secure. We've seen the issues that we've had in the past. There was an escape out of Kingman from a private facility. So there's things that can happen or go wrong when you have a lack of security. And at the end of the day, the state's responsible through custodial care. So it's, it's not a good thing. I would like to see less of that, if not no privatization, because the state ran system, if it's ran properly, can be more efficient. And you had mentioned the medical side of it. They are actually on their fourth contracted medical provider. This is the fourth outfit that they've had, because the previous three all failed to meet the needs of the population. So not third time's the charm, this is the fourth time. So how do you substantiate giving these contracts when you know they're not meeting the needs of the population? We have an aging prison population. And just like we have aging people in our communities that are reliant on Medicare and programs to help with healthcare, it's the same inside the prisons. You have an aging population that has increased medical needs, and we need to be doing better.
And how about, that leads right into the not prison population healthcare. What do you think should be done to improve healthcare in Arizona?
I think at the legislative level, what we could do is provide people with a way of getting more affordable healthcare. I know everybody's pushing to have universal healthcare or healthcare provided, but in the meantime, if we allowed people to buy into our access program, the Arizona Medicaid system, if you go on the federal healthcare.gov, it's going to refer you back through the Medicaid system of that state. And in Arizona, it's the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, which is access. So you can cut all that red tape and allow people to buy in on a sliding scale based on income. Let them buy into the state system of Medicaid so that they would have healthcare coverage. And that way people wouldn't be fearful if you're switching jobs, or if you work a job part-time, you may not even have healthcare coverage. So right now, the model is it's a benefit provided by an employer. Okay, well, healthcare, if you're going to provide for and heal the sick, how can you say it's a benefit of it? It should be a need. It's a human right to have healthcare. So if we make it affordable where people can buy into that Medicaid system at a lower rate based on whatever they make, like a sliding scale, would be a good stepping stone to moving towards a more universal system. And I think it would benefit everybody, because you would have more healthy workers, and people would have that security of knowing if they do switch jobs or switch career paths, you're still going to have healthcare.
Okay. And another issue is we have mass shootings throughout the country. Tucson had it, in 2011. What would you like to see at the legislature in terms of laws passed to make it safer to live in Arizona in terms of guns?
Well, you can, like I said, you can support the 2A. The Second Amendment is part of the Constitution, so you can acknowledge that there is a 2A. But at the same time, we need to be safe and responsible in the handling of weapons. And that starts with universal background checks, red flag laws to detect if there's any concern with the purchaser of why they should or should not have this weapon, whether it's a domestic violence charge, mental health issues, anything that shines that this person may not be able to properly maintain this weapon or be responsible. Gun safety training and safe storage, trigger locks, keeping them safe, keeping them out of the hands of children, safe storage. All of that are concerns that I have. When it comes to the AR-15s, it's an assault rifle. It's a military style weapon. We had an assault weapons ban back when George Bush was president that expired. I would re-implement it. It's not a hunting weapon. It's not a sporting weapon. I know there's ones that would argue differently, but to be safe and responsible, we've seen that many of these shootings occur with that style of weapon. And so to blame it on mental health, it's part of the equation. It's not the total equation. It's the proliferation with guns. And we have a gun lobby that just permeates every political function and allows for this to be such a rampant problem now.
Mhm. Okay. And another thing that is on a lot of people's minds right now is water. We have Colorado River, Lake Powell, Lake Mead. It looks rough. There's been quite the drop, and now the states are negotiating to see which state has to deal with which cuts and all that. What would you do in the legislature to make sure that we have like enough water?
Well, we need to be more conservative with what we have. The water resources that are available to us today, we have to be smarter in what we have while preparing for the future and for future water resources. So a lot of in Arizona, more than 70% of it is used in agricultural and farming. And the methods used are often the canals and open floodplain where they just flood the field, and it causes a lot of waste of water. It's a high water use. If we would go to more of a direct, like a drip irrigation system for those crops, or select crops that are more drought tolerant, things that we can do to help reduce the usage. Agriculture is number one. Second would be the mining industries. They use a lot of water. And then the high-tech sector that's coming in with chip production and the server farms, they use a lot of water. So again, I heard that they're using water reclamation. They're actually reclaiming a lot of that water, which is good. It's being recycled. So they're not just pumping water. But my concerns is the groundwater. And when you hear of areas next door to us in Cochise County, there's areas that are going dry. The wells are going dry because of lack of water. So people are paying an exorbitant amount of money to haul water and have water brought in because their own well went dry. So we need to look at not just our surface water and our streams and tributaries, but also the groundwater and better manage everything. And when it comes to the Colorado River, we're one of 7 states. And there's a priority ranking in there. And for Arizona, it means we're going to lose 20 to 22% of our water for this upcoming year because of cutbacks on the river. So we need to be smarter of what we're doing while looking for more resources.
Okay, great. And we have my last question for you is going to be about voting laws, right? So we have in the Republican side, there is this push to say that the election was stolen, that we need to reform our voting laws. What would you do with regard to that?
The election was not stolen. We've even had people that have attested to that. In the 2020 cycle, we had Maricopa County is one of our largest counties. It's traditionally Republican. However, a lot of them voted for Biden in the election, and we know that. And even their own county recorder, who is Republican, stated that there was no issues with that. Our Republican Attorney General said there was no issues of fraud. And then our Republican governor signed off on it, certifying the results, even though there were others in his party that tried to put forth fake electors. And it just shines a light on the fragility. I guess it's fragile. Our democracy is very fragile, but for voting rights, we have to have assurances that the systems we're using work and that it's a fair election. And we had a fair election. And even everything that was checked, there were 2 or 3 prior routine audits of all the equipment and every process that was done before the Republican side decided to pull in an outside firm, the Cyber Ninjas, to do their own little audit. So it's ridiculous that 2 years later, we still have those election deniers trying to drive this narrative that the election was stolen, which it wasn't. It's a false narrative being put forth by the other side.
Mhm. But do you think that there should be any changes to the laws, or you think it's good as it is?
We've been using the system that Arizona's been using has been in place for over 30 years.
Mhm.
So I think it's a good system. I would add more for polling location security. If anything, the 2020 election showed the threats of security on poll workers. When you have people that are representative of both parties that are trying to do their job of counting ballots, but yet they're being threatened, that's wrong. We shouldn't have that. So I would add election security for staff and people, volunteers, people that are working those polling locations, the election workers, to be safe and to be respected in what they're doing.
Okay. Well, so those are my questions, and I added some from our readers. Is there anything that you would like to add? Any issue that we haven't brought up that you think is important?
The biggies are voting rights in our democracy, women's rights, human rights, and healthcare, and our water, our climate, our public schools, education funding. It's all a foundation for our society. And at the end of the day, regardless of party, we're all a part of society. We all have to live together with each other. And we need to get to the point where we can work together and make the decisions that need to be made so that we can progress. Mm-hmm. You know, all of the infighting and the divisiveness, it causes these other higher issues to fall by the wayside and then get neglected. So I think we could do more, better. And that's why I'm running to be the next state legislator.
Okay, great, wonderful. All right, well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining. We have another round of interviews at 4 p.m. We're going to have Democratic candidates Nancy Gutierrez and Chris Mathis, and we'll have Republican candidate Linda Evans, who are running for the State House in LD 18. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
All right, thank you.
All right, goodbye, everybody.